The worst thing about betrayal is not the words. It is the quiet that follows. Lady Elowen Marlowe was not meant to hear the Duke say it. She knew that from the way the servants froze when her slipper brushed the edge of the drawing-room carpet. She knew it from the way the fire cracked too loudly, as if trying to swallow the sentence whole. She is never the one. The words came from behind the half-closed mahogany doors of Ashford Hall's west study. They were spoken in a voice she knew the way a sailor knows the sound of his own ship in a storm. Low, controlled, a little tired. The Duke of Ashford, her husband. She stood in the corridor with a folded shawl in her hands, the wool pressed so tight against her fingers that it left faint crescent moons in her skin. The hallway smelled faintly of beeswax polish and old parchment, the kind that had been sitting untouched in a cabinet for years. A draft slipped beneath the door and brushed against her ankles, cold and deliberate. Inside the study, glass clicked softly against glass. "I care for her," the Duke continued, quieter now. "But she is never the one." Elowen did not hear the response from whoever stood with him. She did not need to. The sentence had already done its work. It entered her chest like a blade that did not cut skin, only breath. She did not move. Not at first. The corridor was dim, lit only by a wall sconce that hummed faintly as its flame struggled against the wind outside. Rain tapped against the tall windows at the end of the hall. It sounded patient, persistent, never the one. She tried to remember how she had come to stand there in the first place. She had been looking for him. Was the evening guests had long departed. The musicians had packed away their violins. A single rose petal still clung to the staircase banister downstairs, left behind from the small dinner held in their honor. 6 months of marriage, 6 months of careful smiles, 6 months of studying his silences. She had thought she was finally beginning to understand him. The door inside the study shifted slightly, the hinge giving a small groan. Elowen stepped back instinctively, pressing herself against the cool stone wall. Her heart did not race. That would have required panic. What she felt was heavier than panic. It was the slow collapse of something she had built quietly inside herself. The door opened. She saw him first in fragments. The edge of his black coat, the silver cufflink shaped like a hawk's wing. His hand, strong and pale, resting against the doorframe as he spoke to someone still inside. Lord Percival Thorne, perhaps, or his steward. It did not matter. "I will handle it," the Duke said firmly. "This discussion ends here." Then he stepped into the corridor, and the door shut behind him with a soft final click. For one suspended second, he did not see her. He adjusted his gloves, rolled his shoulders as if shaking off a weight. His face was calm in the way marble statues are calm. Then his eyes lifted, and there she was. Elowen did not know what expression she wore. She only knew that she had not meant to be discovered. The shawl fell from her hands and pooled at her feet like surrender. The Duke's gaze sharpened. Elowen. Her name sounded normal on his lips. That was the cruelest part. She studied his face, searching for something fractured. A regret, fear, guilt. She found none. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice surprised her. It did not tremble. It floated, almost detached from her body. "You should be resting," he replied. "The evening was long." "Yes," she said. It was. A beat of silence settled between them. Heavy, knowing. The Duke stepped closer. The scent of his cologne reached her then, cedarwood and something faintly bitter, like crushed bay leaves. She had once found comfort in that scent. Now it felt foreign. "How much did you hear?" he asked. There it was. Not denial, Not confusion. A calculation. Elowen held his gaze. Enough. The rain struck harder against the windows. For a moment, something flickered across his features. Not panic. Not even shame. Something more guarded than that. What as if he were rearranging thoughts inside his mind before allowing them to surface. You misunderstand, he said. She almost smiled at that. I do not think I do, she replied. You said I am never the one. His jaw tightened slightly. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? The question lingered between them like smoke. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked down the corridor, as if checking for listeners. Ashford Hall was vast, but walls had ways of remembering things. I meant, he began carefully, that you are not the one meant to carry certain burdens. She stared at him. Burdens? She repeated. Yes. A strange sound rose in her throat. It was almost laughter, but grief wrapped around it before it could escape. I did not realize I had applied for the position of burden carrier, she said quietly. He exhaled through his nose. You twist my words. And you hide yours. The Duke's eyes darkened slightly at that. Not anger. Something sharper. You are my wife, he said. The statement landed flat. Elowen stepped closer now, closing the small distance between them. She could see the faint scar near his left temple, a thin white line she had once traced with her fingertip when he had allowed himself to soften. She could see the small crease at the corner of his eye that deepened when he read. She knew this man, and yet she did not. You did not marry me for love, she said. It was not an accusation. It was a fact placed gently between them. His silence confirmed it. The marriage had been arranged swiftly after her father's passing. The debts settled, titles preserved, alliances strengthened. She had entered Ashford Hall like a carefully chosen piece of art, placed in exactly the right position to complete a room. She had told herself she could grow into love. She had believed patience could create it. Now she wondered if she had been alone in that belief from the start. I never asked you for love, she continued. I asked you for honesty. His eyes softened then, but only slightly. Honesty can be dangerous, he said. So can silence. They stood facing each other in the dim corridor, the storm outside growing louder, as if nature had decided to speak in their place. You think I do not care for you, he said at last. I think, she replied carefully, that I was convenient. The words settled between them like dust. For the first time that evening, and his composure shifted, just barely. His shoulders stiffened. His gaze dropped for a fraction of a second before rising again. You are not convenient, he said firmly. Then what am I? He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the original sentence. Elowen felt something inside her chest give way. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet unraveling. She had grown up believing that grief arrived in grand gestures, that it would scream and break things and leave visible scars. But this grief was different. It was silent. It sat politely in her ribs and rearranged her breathing. She bent to retrieve the shawl from the floor. The wool felt rougher now, as if the texture had changed in the last few minutes. I did not mean to overhear, she said. He did not respond. She straightened, holding the shawl close to her chest. But perhaps it is better that I did. His eyes searched her face. For what, she did not know. Better, he asked. Yes. Her voice was steady again. Because now I know I must stop trying to be chosen. The Duke took a step forward. Elowen, she raised her hand gently, stopping him. I will not ask you to explain further, she said. You have made yourself clear enough. Another silence. not empty. Final. The corridor felt colder now. The storm outside pressed harder against the glass, as though trying to enter the house and witness the fracture. She turned to leave. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To bed," she answered simply. It was not a dramatic exit. No slammed doors, no tears running down marble staircases. Just a woman walking away with dignity stitched carefully into every step. Halfway down the corridor, she paused, not turning back, only speaking over her shoulder. "Next time," she said quietly, "close the door properly." Then she continued walking. Behind her, the Duke remained standing in the dim light of the sconce, the echo of his own words finally settling into the empty space she left behind. And for the first time since their marriage began, the silence between them felt irreversible. The Duke did not sleep that night. The tour, Ashford Hall, grew quiet in layers. First, the servants' footsteps faded. Then the kitchen fires dimmed. Then even the wind outside seemed to tire of its own anger. But inside the West Wing, behind a closed door lined with dark walnut panels, Alistair Hale, Duke of Ashford, sat alone with a sentence he could not take back. "She is never the one." It had sounded precise when he said it. Now it sounded cruel. His study smelled of ink and damp wool. A map of the northern estates lay unfurled across his desk, its corners held down by brass weights, shaped like lion heads. Beside it sat a sealed envelope bearing the black wax crest of the crown. He had not opened it yet. He already knew what it contained. A demand, a reminder, a warning. He leaned back in his chair and pressed his thumb against the faint scar near his temple, and as if pressure there could silence the memory of Elowen's voice in the corridor. Enough. She had heard enough. He had seen it in her eyes. Not hysteria, not even fury. Withdrawal. That frightened him more than any accusation would have. Alistair rose from his chair and crossed to the tall window overlooking the eastern gardens. Rain clung to the glass in uneven streaks, distorting the lantern light below. The rose beds she had personally redesigned glistened under the storm. She had insisted on planting winter-blooming varieties, saying the estate should never look abandoned, even in the coldest months. She had said it with a small, hopeful smile. He had not realized then how much of herself she was describing. He replayed the moment in the corridor, the way her shawl slipped from her hands, the way she said she would stop trying to be chosen. Chosen. The word lodged in his chest. He had not married Elowen Marlowe because she was convenient. He had married her because she was steady, and steady was something he had not been allowed to be. A knock sounded at his door, sharp, controlled. "Enter," he said. Lord Percival Thorne stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind him. Percival was tall and narrow-faced, with hair already thinning despite his youth. He carried himself like a man who measured every breath before taking it. "You should not have let her hear," Percival said quietly. Alistair did not turn from the window. "I did not intend for her to." "That does not change the result." "No," Alistair agreed. "It does not." Percival approached the desk and glanced at the unopened letter. It arrived at dusk." "I know." "You must respond within the week." Alistair finally turned. His expression was calm again, but there was something raw beneath it now. "I am aware." Percival studied him. "And your wife?" The word felt heavier than usual. "She believes I married her for strategy alone," Alistair said. Percival hesitated. "Did you not?" Alistair's gaze sharpened. "Do not simplify what you do not understand." Percival inclined his head slightly, but did not apologize. "Then clarify it for me." Silence stretched between them. Alistair walked back to the desk and finally broke the seal on the black wax letter. The paper inside carried the faint metallic scent of fresh ink. The message was brief. The crown required loyalty. The crown required heirs. The crown required proofs, and he folded the letter once and set it down. "She is never the one," Percival said slowly. "You meant she is never the one they will accept." Alistair's jaw tightened. Yes. Elowen did not come from a powerful enough lineage to satisfy certain expectations. Her father had been respected but financially reckless. Her dowry had saved Ashford's crumbling southern lands. The marriage had solved immediate problems, but it had created a quieter one. There were whispers that the Duke required a more politically advantageous alliance, that Ashford blood must be strengthened. That sentiment had no place in legacy, and now the crown was beginning to echo those whispers. "She is not fragile," Percival said. "I know that." "Then why treat her as if she is?" The question struck clean. Alistair did not answer immediately, but he moved instead to the fireplace, where the last embers glowed red beneath a thin layer of ash. "Because if she knows the full extent of it," he said at last, "she becomes a target." Percival's expression shifted. "You believe they would move against her?" "They have done worse for less." A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. His mother standing in this very hall years ago, accused of weakening the family name. His father's silence, the cold politeness of men who smiled while planning her removal from influence. Alistair had learned young that affection could be weaponized. He would not allow that to happen again. "She thinks I do not love her," he said quietly. Percival raised a brow. "Do you?" The question lingered longer than the others had. Alistair stared into the fading embers. He remembered Elowen kneeling in the garden with soil on her gloves. He remembered the way she read letters aloud to the aging staff who could no longer see clearly. He remembered the scent of lavender oil she placed on her pillow when she thought he was already asleep. He remembered how Ashford Hall had begun to feel less like a fortress and more like a home. "I did not plan to," he admitted. "That is not what I asked." Alistair closed his eyes briefly. "Yes," he said. The word was almost unfamiliar in his mouth. Percival exhaled softly. "Then you have miscalculated. I know. You cannot protect her from a war she does not know exists." Alistair's gaze darkened. "Watch me." But even as he said it, doubt crept in, because tonight he had seen something he had not anticipated. Distance. Elowen had not begged, and she had not demanded explanations. She had stepped back, and if she continued stepping back, he would lose her in a way no political rival could engineer. "Speak to her," Percival said. "Tell her enough to keep her beside you." Alistair shook his head. "If she chooses to leave, she will not." "You are very certain." Percival offered a faint, humorless smile. "I have observed your wife more closely than you assume. She does not abandon easily, but she does withdraw when wounded." The truth of that stung. Alistair dismissed him shortly after. When the door closed again, the study felt heavier. He poured himself a measure of brandy, but did not drink it. Instead, he carried the glass to the hallway and paused outside their shared bedchamber. The door was closed. For months it had remained slightly ajar at night. A quiet invitation. Now it was firmly shut. He lifted his hand to knock, then stopped. Inside, he imagined her lying awake, staring at the canopy above the bed. He imagined her replaying his words the same way he was replaying hers. "Stop trying to be chosen." He lowered his hand. For the first time in years, Alistair Hale felt something dangerously close to regret. Not because she had hurt him, but because he had underestimated how deeply she wished to belong, and how deeply he needed her to. He turned away from the door and walked down the corridor alone, the echo of his footsteps following him like an accusation. Behind the closed door, Elowen was not asleep. She lay still in the darkness, her eyes open, listening to the silence on the other side. And for the first time since entering Ashford Hall, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond it. Morning arrived without ceremony. Ashford Hall did not pause for broken sentences or wounded pride. The servants drew open the curtains. Fires were lit. Silver trays clinked in distant corridors. The world continued with its usual discipline. But inside the east bedchamber, Elowen Marlowe had already made a decision before the first bell rang. She had not slept, not because of tears. She had shed none. Grief had settled into something quieter during the night, and it had sharpened into clarity. If she was never the one, then she would stop waiting to be named. She rose before dawn and dressed without assistance, choosing a simple slate blue gown instead of her usual ivory. She braided her hair herself, fingers steady, though her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Not fragile, not dramatic, just resolved. The air in the room still carried the faint scent of lavender oil from the night before. She pressed the stopper firmly back into the small glass vial and placed it in the drawer. No more rituals of comfort. When she stepped into the corridor, it felt different. Not colder, just less personal. The long runner carpets, the ancestral portraits, the polished railings. None of it felt like hers anymore. Halfway down the stairs, she paused. The study door was open. Alistair stood inside, already dressed for the day. His coat was perfectly fitted, his posture immaculate, but there were shadows beneath his eyes that had not been there before. He looked up when he sensed her presence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Hope is a strange emotion. It does not arrive loudly. It stands at a distance and waits to see if it is welcome. "Elowen," he said quietly. She entered the study, but did not close the door behind her. "I will not argue," she began, "and I will not accuse." He watched her carefully. "I believe you when you say I misunderstood," she continued. "But I also believe you chose your words with care." His jaw tightened slightly. "You were not meant to hear that," he said. "I know." She moved closer to the desk and noticed the black sealed letter resting beside the maps, and the wax crest had been broken. The paper folded again, but not neatly, as if it had been opened more than once. Her eyes lingered on it. "That is what this is about, isn't it?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. "Elowen," he said slowly, "there are pressures you do not see." "Then show them to me." The request was simple, not emotional, not pleading. "Show me." Alistair studied her face as if weighing something dangerous. "If I do," he said, "you cannot unknow it." She almost smiled at that. "You speak as if ignorance is protection." He hesitated, then pushed the letter toward her. "Read it." She unfolded the paper. The ink was dark and sharp against the cream surface. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. The Crown questioned the stability of Ashford's lineage. Well, the Crown expected assurance. The Crown required heirs of strategic value. Elowen's fingers tightened slightly on the page. "So," she said quietly, "I am never the one they will approve of." The word they hung heavily in the air. Alistair stepped forward. "It is not about approval. It is always about approval." Her voice did not rise. It deepened. He reached for the letter, but did not take it from her. "They believe Ashford should align more powerfully, that I should remarry into influence." The room went very still. "Remarry," she repeated. He held her gaze. "It is a suggestion, not a command. For now, yes." She folded the letter carefully along its original crease and placed it back on the desk. "And you intended to shield me from this by pretending I was not the one. I intended to prevent you from becoming leverage." The word struck differently than the others. Leverage, not unworthy, not unloved. Useful. Elowen let out a slow breath. "You decided for me," she said. Again. His expression hardened slightly. "It is my responsibility to protect this estate." "And what is my responsibility?" she asked. "To remain silent while you carry every threat alone?" He did not answer. She stepped closer. "You think distance keeps me safe," she said, "but it only keeps me uninformed." Something shifted in his eyes then. Not calculation. Recognition. "You would stay?" he asked quietly. "With full knowledge?" she replied. "Yes." The word hung between them. He studied her as if seeing her for the first time. "No, they will test you," he warned. "They already have. They may attempt to humiliate you publicly. I have endured worse privately." The truth of that landed heavily. Alistair exhaled slowly, as though releasing something he had been holding since boyhood. "I said you are never the one," he admitted, "because I feared if they saw how essential you are to me, they would use it." The confession was raw, unpolished. Elowen's breath caught despite herself. "Essential?" she asked. He nodded once. "You changed this house. You changed me." The words did not sound rehearsed. They sounded reluctant, dragged into daylight. "I have lived my life assuming attachment is weakness," he continued. "I did not know what to do when I realized I could not imagine this hall without you in it." Hope stepped closer, yet she searched his face for deception and found none. "You should have trusted me with that," she said softly. "I am learning how." Silence settled again, but this time it was not final. It was fragile. Elowen looked around the study, the maps, the ledgers, the sealed documents, and then back at him. "If they want strength," she said, "we will show them strength." His brow lifted slightly. "We?" he asked. "Yes." She moved to stand beside him rather than across from him. "You will not face the crown alone," she said, "and you will not decide my fate without my voice." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Small, but real. "You are formidable when you are angry," he observed. "I am formidable when I am informed." For the first time since the night before, something lighter entered the room. Not certainty, but possibility. He reached for her hand carefully, as if unsure whether she would allow it. She did. Her fingers were warm despite the morning chill. "I was wrong," he said quietly. She nodded once. "Yes. And I regret the way you learned of it. I regret having to overhear it." Their honesty felt awkward, but clean. Outside, the storm had passed. The gardens glistened under pale sunlight. The winter roses stood upright, petals unbroken. Elowen glanced toward the window. "You once told me winter flowers are foolish," she said. "I did. And yet they bloom anyway." He followed her gaze. "They are resilient," he admitted. She squeezed his hand gently. "So am I." Hope does not erase grief. It grows beside it. As the morning light filled the study, the Duke of Ashford and his wife stood not as strategy and solution, but as two people choosing to confront a storm together. And for the first time, neither of them felt alone inside Ashford Hall.